Well, welcome everyone. I believe we're live and it's absolutely wonderful to have you all here today to the Mercer FSC event to discuss gender equity in funds management investment teams, or as I like to call it, how to get more women running money. And I'd like to welcome very much this today, FSC Chairman, Mercer CEO, David Bryant, Kylie Willment, who's Chief Investment Officer at Mercer, Jodie, Hampshire, Managing Director for Russell Investments in Australia, and our moderator, Michelle Lopez, who's Head of Australian Equities at Aberdeen Standard Investments. So welcome to you all, and I know we're going to have a great session today, and I would certainly invite everybody to put some questions to our panellists, because we'll have plenty of time for questions. So I just wanted to give you a brief outline of, I guess, where we started with all of this. 4 years ago, a survey of Australian and global equity managers was done by Frontier Advisors and found that women made up just 14%, that's 14% of Australian equity managers. Now, this was well below the global rate of 22%. And further analysis identified that almost half of the managers here had no women in their investment teams at all. So fast forward, this year we surveyed FSC fund manager members and we got a good response, and we found that 25% of our fund manager members had women or there was a level 25% of women made up their investment management teams. This is a significant step up from the 2017 survey, but as you would know, there's still more work to be done. We'd like to get those numbers up to at least 30%. That's the kind of benchmark for number of women in key management positions in Australian companies, and of course on boards now in Australia. We're starting to lead the pack globally. I think the next target is we've reached 30, and now we're heading on to 40% as a target there. So a little bit of a way to go with funds management. But I do want to thank very much and identify our Policy Director for Investments and Global Markets, Bianca Richardson, who's led the work here along with many of our members, including Jodie, Hampshire, and our Deputy Chair, Jen Driscoll. So thanks, B. And thank you to all your hard work and all the members who helped you along the way. We have quite a lot of fund managers in our membership group, around 40. They're big, medium and small fund managers, and they will be promoting gender diversity in their teams through the FSC Women in Investment Management Charter, which is part of our Gender Diversity Guidance Note. They are best practice guidelines and they will be followed by our members. Now, we're very pleased to announce we have 8 FSC members as signatories to the Charter today, with I'm sure more to come. This is a commitment by the industry to support change, which is great news. So I think some of the issues we want to explore today is the why. Why is gender diversity in investment teams important? Why are we pushing this so hard? And what is the pathway to getting more women running money? I'm delighted to be able to introduce to you David Bryant, the FSC Chairman and CEO of Mercer Australia. Thanks, David.
Hey everyone, and welcome. I think I unmuted. Hopefully that's, so my apologies, hopefully that's working. I got a message come up. Sorry, let me go again. Welcome everyone with that. That's a very Zoom-like experience to get things kicked off with. Thank you very much for joining us. And on behalf of the Financial Services Council and Mercer, welcome. Mercer's delighted to be working with the Financial Services Council on really what is a very, very important initiative. And I do want to say up front that we all do clearly understand that gender diversity is only one aspect of a diverse and inclusive team. And the focus today is very much on gender diversity, but diversity in all of its forms is really important to a lot of what we're going to discuss today. One of the things that we need to really be conscious of is gender equality is really fundamental to the basis of having a strong team. To my mind, very much strong teams have different styles, they have different opinions, they have different ways of thinking and experiences. And a really strong team is one that is both diverse and challenging of each other, but in a very positive way. And the success from diversity isn't just felt by our organisations, our clients and their members get much better results by virtue of that. And we're going to talk through some of that today. Aside from managing superannuation investments for our clients, at Mercer, one of our core businesses is helping organisations to be better organisations. Yet even within Mercer, with that level of knowledge, we still have more work to do as well, and we acknowledge that. Mercer globally, about 5 years ago, undertook what was then a groundbreaking study that we titled When Women Thrive. And we've recently done an update of that study and have noted that there has been improvement in financial services and perhaps a bit less so in investment management in particular. When we look at things like the retention rates of our female colleagues, our recruitment and their mobility in the organisation. So those savings do represent some positive indication that collectively we have achieved some change. But while that research shows that we've delivered that change, we still do not have a clear pathway to achieving in the near future parity in some of these critical areas. And the work that the FSC is leading at an industry level, we see as being a significant contributor to that. And that change really is going to be driven by a couple of things. Firstly, signing up to the Charter, and certainly at Mercer's end, we've pleasingly and very willingly signed up as one of those, hopefully a lot more than 8 members to that Charter, because we all need to show commitment and we need to make sure that we don't just have policies in these areas, but we've got very clear actions that support that. And at Mercer, we see our role in a range of areas in the funds management industry, in research and thought leadership, but also that should be backed up with important initiatives such as gender equality. And we know that we will be a better organisation for being very conscious and being very action oriented with that. So we willingly became one of the initial members to the FSC Charter, and we look forward to lots more organisations also adopting the Charter alongside us and our other members. So Michelle, with that, I'm going to hand over to you, maybe a little bit about your story, and then we can open up some of the panel discussion.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, David. And I'm personally thrilled to see the progress that we've made over the last 5 years on those figures that Sally first spoke to. And I agree there's still a long way to go, in my humble opinion, but it's people like yourself, like Kylie, like Jodie, like the FSC that are really shining light on this matter, changing policies, which is really important, and ensuring that there's a very strong call to action, which I think is what is going to lead to change in the end. So my story, it seems it's quite a unique one in the sense that I represent that small subset of women in funds management that entered the industry at an early stage, so effectively as a graduate, and have really risen through the ranks to become head of Australian equities for Aberdeen currently. And while I feel very lucky to have been given the opportunities to have been developed and progressed within Aberdeen, I also realise that this is not yet, hopefully, the norm. And I also know that it has been incredibly difficult and it has required a lot of grit to get ahead. It hasn't been an easy ride, and you know, just for some personal context, I am the daughter of immigrants who arrived with the contents of what they had in their backpack to their name. I've been public schooled the whole way through. I haven't really had anyone to open doors for me in the industry or refer me in any way. But in fact, I got my foot in the door by applying for a quant analyst role at Watson Wyatt at the time, which was coming on to 2 decades now. And I was tasked with charged with the very tedious task of updating all the fund manager reports. But this opened me up to a new world of investment teams, of styles, of markets more generally. And I realised very quickly that I actually wanted to be on the other side of the table. I wanted to be the one making those investment decisions. So when a position came up on the Australian equity desk at Aberdeen, that was back in 2004, I took it, and 17 years later, I guess you can say the rest is history, and here I am. But if I can just reflect on my time a little bit, there are some very real barriers for women in the industry. And I'd just like to state two, because I'm sure we'll get to some of this as we progress. Firstly, I find the lack of awareness of the asset management industry as a whole, both at the high school and the university level. I actually didn't know this industry existed before I started researching for that Watson Wyatt role. So I think a lot more work needs to be done around that, and particularly at the university level, to attract talent first and foremost into the industry. The second barrier I'd identify is just lack of flexibility. You know, as I was working my way through the ranks, there was absolutely no chance of a part-time role. There was pretty strict maternity leave rules, you know, maximum 12 months. And, you know, with my first child, I came back well before the 12 months. There was absolutely no men taking extended parental leave. And, you know, these things make a difference. And it's certainly changing today and as we speak. And I think that's a huge benefit, and we're going to see the results and the benefits of that in coming years. But that really did make a difference to retention of women at that kind of mid to higher levels as well. So my advocacy, I guess, on the topic around this is the fact that I am a living example of what happens within diversity. You know, I have personally experienced the benefits. And David, you mentioned a lot around having a diverse team matters hugely to outcomes, and I cannot agree more. You know, my team is evidence of this. We run Australian equity funds. Every single one of them are outperforming over the medium and long term, being 3 and 5 years. But there's also the intangible benefits that are arguably less quantifiable, but equally important. And, you know, the types of discussions we have as a team, the behaviours that we really encourage and reward. And that ultimately leads to better decisions and a much more fulfilling place to work, I believe. But that's a little bit about me, and I've probably gone on for a bit longer than I should have. So let's kick off, and perhaps we can open up the panel with the very important question which Sally posed at the beginning, which is why? You know, why do we need more women running money? And I'm going to pass to you, David, as the male on the panel, as to why you think it's important.
Well, Michelle, thank you. And thank you for sharing that story with us all as well. A couple of things I'll call out. So Willis Towers Watson did some research recently and actually identified the positive correlation that we see between gender equality and some performance metrics, return on equity, financial performance, and importantly, overall employee satisfaction, as well as innovation, creativity. And so that valuable research, I think, helps crystallise some of those things. But to be honest, we don't need research to tell us something that, to my mind, is very much common sense. And balanced and diversified teams simply make better teams. Managing money well means that you've got to have a really healthy contest of ideas and a range of thinking. And you also need a mix of styles. You know, I'm always thinking about who's going to bring out the best in the team rather than who can do a task better. There was a 2015 McKinsey study that showed public companies that were in the top quartile for gender diversity were 15% more likely to have financial returns above their respective medians for those industries. And if you added ethnic diversity to that percentage increased to 35%. And so, you know, there is research that helps quantify some of this, but it is as much the obvious and common sense as it is, I think, some of that statistical support.
That makes a lot of sense to me, David. I'm going to throw you in the mix, Kylie. I see that your mic has come off. Or come on. What are your views here?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think at the my sentiment's very similar to what David has said, but, you know, as investors, I think that, you know, we believe pretty strongly in the power of diversification, and that if we have a diverse portfolio, it will be a more robust and resilient portfolio. So, you know, it shouldn't be a big stretch for us to say that if you believe in diversification in this portfolio sense, you should also believe in it in the team that's making those investment decisions and constructing that portfolio. So again, you know, I do think it comes down to common sense, but I also know that, you know, a lot of people are evidence-based and they want to say, well, where's the evidence of this? If I really am going to, you know, push for this, I need to know that, you know, it's the right thing to do. And I think the evidence is mounting. There's certainly plenty of studies, and we've referenced some already about us, you know, establishing that fact or the evidence that more diverse teams are better teams. And I think increasing amounts of evidence that are starting to come through that more diverse investment teams can deliver better performance. But for me, yeah, it's more diverse team, better decision making, ultimately and importantly for an investment team, leading to better investment outcomes. And so the why is important, and it's good that we're talking about that today, but I also think the how is just as important, because it'd be nice to get to a point where we can accept the why, you know, that's a given, and let's move on to just working out how we can make some improvements. Absolutely. I think the how is going to be a big topic of conversation, and I'd actually like to get into that a lot more, into a lot more detail and specifics. But perhaps I would like to sort of bring Jodie in here and, you know, hear your view. Is there something further you'd like to add as to the value different perspectives create within investment teams? And I don't know if you have any further comments or.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. I come to you from Gamaragal land today, where the internet is quite terrible. I've booted all my homeschooling kids off the internet, but I have dropped out a couple of times already, so please bear with me, Michelle. If I do drop out, I will rejoin. I'd like to pay my respects to elders, the Gamaragal elders, past, present, and emerging as well. I wanted to pick up on David's point around the diversity, choosing to focus on gender diversity from a working group perspective, and just explain that a little more. We do think diversity in all of its forms is important, but we needed, as we were starting, to focus our energy and focus our efforts. We had the frontier research that Sally referenced that confirmed that gender was a critical issue, and we have good data on women in investment teams, investment management teams. So in due course, we will broaden out from gender, but it seemed a really sensible place to start. So when I think about women and money more broadly, I always laugh about this joke I found when I typed into Google women and money, and there's heaps of terrible jokes about women and money. And my favorite is a man has his credit card stolen and decides not to report it because the thief spends less than his wife. It's like, yeah, boom, boom. There's hundreds and hundreds of jokes that suggest that that women have no place dealing with money and no place dealing in the world of finance. Certainly, I think myths like that make women on average less financially literate. But when women are financially literate and do invest, there's growing evidence that it really makes a difference. So David and Kylie have spoken to the big picture evidence about diverse teams leading to better sort of company outcomes, return on equity outcomes, and so on. There's not yet loads of studies about diversity alpha, if you like, but there are a few studies that I wanted to reference. Three very quickly, Michelle. One is from the Warwick Business School in the UK, which showed through a 3-year study of around 3,000 investors that the women outperformed the men by 1.8%. And they attributed this to women taking a longer term view, being less likely to trade lottery style stocks and less likely to trade in general. The second was a study by Hargreaves Lansdowne, the UK's biggest consumer investment platform, that saw women investors had an edge of about 80 basis points per annum over the men. And then there's a third study from 2018 from the Harvard Business Review for venture capital firms in particular, but the statistics and data is much easier to get for those firms with very flat structures. And there was a very strong link between diverse teams, gender diverse teams, and fund returns. From Russell Investments' perspective, one of our great strengths is manager research, and we speak to thousands of managers a year. We've been rating diversity and inclusion since 2017, and since 2019 flag women and minority-owned firms and women and minority-led firms. Thanks, Michelle.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those reports, Jodie. And I think that's something that, as we see time progress, there's going to be more and more of these research papers coming out, really accrediting the alpha generation as well. So thanks for pointing those out, and I'm sure there's a few more that we can provide as well. With that then, maybe Kylie, I'd be interested on your side as, you know, CIO at Mercer, and your day-to-day is very much dealing with a whole range and a cross-section of investment management teams across different styles. What are the changes that you've noticed over the last 5-10 years? And specifically, you know, have you seen greater representation of females within investment teams? And at what level are these? At the analyst level? Are they more at the portfolio manager level, the ones making the decisions? What has been your direct observation?
Yeah, there's some interesting questions in there, and I think you know, at what level and, you know, what's going on within the decision makers within investment teams is a really important one. Obviously, as a multi-manager, and I'm sure Jodie could speak to this as well, one of the things that we do and spend, you know, a huge amount of our time on is assessing and selecting investment managers and their diversity and inclusion practices, and the diversity of their teams has come much more into the frame in a very structural way, in the way that we assess and rate investment managers, because of that belief that we spoke about earlier, that more diverse teams will lead to better investment outcomes over time. I think, you know, one of the changes, so Sally earlier quoted some statistics around, you know, some improvement in gender diversity in investment teams, and I think we've definitely seen at an overarching investment team level that there has been a bit of an uptick in broad gender diversity. But when we push the investment managers and say, okay, don't just report to me your whole investment team, which can obviously include, you know, everyone down to the most junior analysts, we've been focusing in on the key decision makers, so specifically portfolio managers, very senior members of the investment team, or on an investment committee where they are responsible for decision making. And when we push them on that, they come back with actually quite different statistics. So recently we did a scan of our global investment manager platform, if you like, all around the world for Mercer, including our portfolios here in Australia, to get a sense of the gender diversity of the key decision makers, and we were very strict on the criteria around that. And that came back with only about 12% across asset classes and across different investment styles where the female sort of key decision makers. So that was a bit of a drop off from what we would see if we were asking just for the investment management team or the investment team itself. So I do think it's important that, you know, it's important to be building the talent pipeline, of course, so it's not a bad thing to be building gender diversity in at the more junior levels, because that's obviously one of the ways that we're going to get females into more senior roles. But we also need to be making sure that, you know, we are focusing on those senior levels as well. And, you know, maybe just to share some of my own personal experience as well, and I'm sure any female in this industry could attest to the fact that if you ever go, not that we're at face-to-face conferences at the moment, but if you're in an industry conference and you do a scan around the room, if you went back, you know, 10 years ago, you might have been lucky to get 5% females in the room. These days it's a little bit better, but it's still pretty low, and you still feel a little bit like the odd one out, right? You feel different, and that doesn't, you know, really foster that sense of belonging. And still to this day, to be honest, you know, I get people who are surprised when they find out that I'm the Chief Investment Officer, and once they know that, they treat me differently. And, you know, I often wonder, do you really need to have that data point to, you know, to give the appropriate levels of respect? So improvement, I think. We need more focus at the senior levels, and I think, you know, a bit more momentum behind the improvement would be good to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kylie, and I can very much attest to those situations. You know, David, maybe I'll throw you this, and I'm going to link this in. I've just had a question come through, and I think this is a really interesting question, and it's around what men running investment businesses can do to encourage women to come and work with them and to encourage them to move up the ladder and eventually run for money. You know, what do you think are some of the things that men can do? And also what's going to move the dial at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. It comes down to two things as far as I'm concerned, and that's leadership and accountability. And certainly for anyone running an organisation, you have to set the tone in everything that you do. And we kind of know that, but this is a topic where I'm not sure it gets done as well as it could. And just before I answer, I would note that
I've taken up a lot of it.
Mercer, sorry, I was worried that was me. Mercer's done some research and we do two things that I want to call out. So firstly, we found that women were 30% less likely than to be promoted than men, and 50% more likely to leave at the senior analyst level. Now, we all compete for talent. It is crazy that organisations would just allow those sort of things to happen. So it then comes down to, all right, how do we lead the way? So the first thing was really to understand what is causing that impact. And this is through our leadership team at Mercer. And we identified three things that we needed to make better. And they were culture. Are we always working in a way that is conducive to being a great place to work for everybody, regardless of style, and whether that's gender, whether it's race, whether it's just different personalities, but have we got the culture right? Where are the biases in everything that we do? And I'll talk a little bit about recruitment in a moment, but you know, hidden biases, no matter how focused we think we are, they still exist. And something that was touched on earlier was a lack of flexible working. I think, Michelle, in your story, you shared some examples of that. And none of those things should be an impediment. They shouldn't be a problem. So the first thing you've got to do is you have to know where are you at. So within Mercer, we do at least twice a year, beginning of year, middle of year, what we call a labour market map. We go through all of our businesses, we look at all of our colleagues at every level, gender, promotion, how much are people coming, going, getting promoted to different jobs. So we've got very granular data to help support that. And then we anchor it in action. So then it's about, right, what are the initiatives that we're going to undertake? So with that leadership, because our leadership team, and I want to note 75% of our leadership team is female. Now, that's changed because we realised we needed to make further improvement. It's a healthier and better team for those changes. And we took on the task of saying, okay, we know where the problem areas are. How can we make that better? We've been through things such as our talent acquisition process. How do we make sure in every instance we've got balanced, gender balanced candidate pools, and we don't proceed with an unbalanced list. We make sure that we gender neutralise our language in recruitment. We're very clear that we've got to convey the right thinking. I'm doing a lot of work with the team on, we need to start thinking about who's the best candidate a bit differently, because if we take a situation where someone who's got 15 years experience is always better than someone who has 10, even though I noted earlier we've made some progress, we're never going to close the gap. My question of our leadership team is different. Who's going to bring the most to the team? And 15 years versus 10 years experience, and some of these, I think, more outdated selection criteria, we've got to do away with those. We've got to look at who brings out the best of everyone. Yes, individual contribution matters, but it's also focusing on who's going to bring the most to the team. And we also, in our staff engagement surveys, finally focus very much on understanding what it's like for our people, making sure we've got clear data by gender, and that we understand what our experience is like for all of our colleagues, but separately our male and female colleagues. And we've been running internal talk sessions with different groups around, again, diversity, gender, seniority, and so forth. So we put a lot of emphasis on information. We are very clear about action, and we make sure that we exhibit that all the time. And we check our homework. We hold ourselves to account.
I think accountability and leadership there is very, very important. And I know from experience directly, when you give someone a very specific KPI, even better, you tie their remuneration to it. It becomes very clear, it becomes their focus, and really at the end of the day, it just means that it's more likely that it will be met. So I think that's a really important point to make. I'd like to also acknowledge the barriers a little bit more, which you touched on as well. And Jodie, maybe if I could get your views here, and I'm going to tie in a question that's come through around the role of asset consultants and fund manager clients in supporting change. So, for example, portfolio managers, and we like stability. We like longevity. It's sought after because there is that continuity of strategy and whatever the case is. So how do you tie then greater flexibility as a barrier that we need to, or a way to devolve the barrier? How do you tie that in with part-time roles at a CIO level, or flexible work or job share arrangements? Is it possible? And how do you see that playing out into the future?
Thanks, Michelle. So in terms of challenges on the ground, I'm hoping that this FSC Charter and this conversation and more to come will encourage very pragmatic conversations about what's really hard and what's not so hard. And I will say, I think most managers are facing the same challenges. It's not organisation specific. Most firms are behind where they would like to be from a gender diversity perspective. So I think honest conversations about that are really refreshing. So in terms of the challenges that we face within organisations, I would describe them as twofold, with two sets of timeframes as well. One is pipeline challenges, which have been referenced already. For years, quality organisations have been seeking diverse candidate lists, but sometimes struggle to find appropriate candidates to hire. And we all do all of the things you would expect us to do to respond to that. But the reality is it's going to take us years, and we must as an industry together deal with this, years in schools, universities. I think you said, Michelle, you didn't know about asset management before you started looking for a role. I was exactly the same. I'm in a business role, not an investment management role, but exactly the same story. I was like, what? So I had to go and research that. That should not be the case. So the pipeline is a long-term game. We need more visible female role models, like both of you on here. So we have a female global chief investment officer and a female global CEO at Russell, who was a portfolio manager. So as you'd imagine, this is getting a really significant focus, and we're doing a lot of work within the business on retention and advancement. The other question was around the role of asset consultants. It's a real trade-off, right, between you want longevity of teams, you want stability of teams, and you're balancing that against an industry-wide desire to increase female participation in investment management. We have tried really, really hard in this FSC work to be very, very pragmatic and acknowledge and respect where we start from. So I don't think, asset consultants are still wanting team stability, but we need to be more balanced. And I think, as David was saying earlier, think about opening our minds to who a good candidate might be, with a view to increasing the proportion of females. One last point, Michelle, I think flexible working and the use of flexible working by everyone in a business is going to be critical to advancing females in senior roles. And I think, as awful as the pandemic is, and as sick as I am of wearing my UGG boots most days, it is shifting the dial on this. So I think before the pandemic, you would have often, not always, often mums would take working from home days or work part-time. I think that is shifting enormously. And I think one of the best things you can do as a business leader is promote and encourage your male staff members to carry their share of any parental load or any caring load, to give the females in their life, whether they work for your firm or another firm, the opportunity to spread their wings a bit. I think that's an enormously critical issue.
Thank you, Jodie. I can't agree with you more. And this is just one of those very real examples of taking something good out of something that's really awful at the moment. I think we can really run with this and create some meaningful change, particularly around flexible working. That is going to be, you know, we'll see the result of it longer term. Look, I think maybe we cast it a little bit wider here, and I'd really love to hear some of the ways that maybe, Kylie, you're addressing this within your organisation as well at Mercer. What are some initiatives that you're undertaking to support the goal of increasing women running money, and how are you holding people accountable?
Yeah, sure. Probably one of my favourite topics, but I'll talk to that on a few levels. I mean, one, there's what we're doing within our own investment team. So David's talked a bit broadly around the broader leadership at Mercer, but we've been very focused over the last 3 or 4 years in improving all forms of diversity within my own investment team, particularly cutting across gender and cultural diversity. And really pleased to say that with a bit of targeted effort and thoughtfulness in the way that we've been building the team and our recruitment processes and the way that we have been attracting talent, that we've been able to hit 40% females within the investment team at this point. And when we put that measure of the key decision makers over ourselves, we're currently at about 30, so it'd be good to get that up, but we certainly made progress in that regard. But it takes quite deliberate and focused action and intent, I think, to do that. We are a signatory, as David said, to the FSC Women Charter, Women in Investment Management Charter, so that holds us to account on that as well. The pipeline is an interesting one. So obviously we can do that through graduate recruitment, but getting into the universities, I think, is an important point. So we do partner with Future Impact, and I think a number of other investment managers who are on this call might do as well. So that's sort of an initiative where we go into the universities and we're really trying to raise that awareness of what a career in investment management looks like. For the last few years, there's a bit of an investment competition that happens as part of the Future Impact initiatives, and so we've been able to host an intern winners of the investment competition into our investment team over the last few years, and I think that's been terrific in terms of that pipeline development. But the most powerful thing I think that we can actually do as a multi-manager is recognise the tremendous influence that we have across the investment management industry and community. So I said that we've been surveying our investment managers to find out how much gender diversity we've got in the key decision makers, coming in at around 12%. We have set ourselves a target to get that number, so female key decision makers across our portfolios, across the investment managers in our portfolios, up to at least 30% by 2030. So that's, again, a way that we're going to measure and track our improvements in that space. And as a major client for many of these investment managers, it's about engaging with them and saying, okay, we know you're not there today. We don't want you to rush it, of course, because, again, you don't want to be making changes too quickly or putting people into roles when they're not ready for them. But we want to know what you're doing around making improvements. We want to know how you're building this into your succession planning. And for ourselves, we're going to track our improvements against that measure. Now, hopefully we can get to more than 30%, and hopefully we can get there quicker by 2030. But we did want to recognise in setting that kind of target for ourselves that, change is not going to happen overnight. And we do need to be a bit considered around the way that change comes through, but absolutely using that tremendous influence that we have as a major investor for many of the investment managers is perhaps something that other asset owners or multi-managers could be thinking about as well.
Absolutely. And I think you've given me a bit of a free ticket here, Kylie, because you realise that, this is obviously something for us and as an investment team, I find incredibly powerful. And, we're currently sitting at 50% female decision makers within the equity team within Australia. And regionally as well, it's incredibly strong. So I think we need further, and targets have got their challenges as well. But I think it's kind of the only way from here. And so that's really encouraging to hear that you're setting some very firm targets around that, and particularly at the investment decision-making level. Further to that. So I guess, David, Jodie, just opening it up, is there anything other specific how you're driving change within your organisations that you wanted to raise? I think it's quite an important topic for people to understand, that key people like yourselves that are driving and are influential are making these drawing these lines in the sand, really.
Yeah, Michelle, I'd echo a lot of things that Jodie and Kylie have shared, and as we said, we've touched on things around recruitment. I do think accessing universities, all organisations fighting for a limited talent pool is going to slow down our rate of progress, and so all of us making an effort to help build interest in our industry and to make it an attractive one for all sorts of people to participate in is particularly relevant. Internally, in addition to some of those recruitment things I noted, we have implemented a range of accelerated development programs for our high potential female talent. So, you know, we'd like to think that our system generally works well in identifying and progressing people, but even at Mercer, we've decided that specific interventions to make sure that we can accelerate that are very important. And we did touch on engagement and retention. You know, it's such a shame, the level of turnover that we do see at different levels that some of that Mercer research showed. And so even smaller initiatives like removing gender language from parental leave policies. You know, I love kids, right? And I've got 6, and you know, it's having time for both parents with the children and being respectful of everyone's work and career, and approaching it in a way that's just how you do things. You know, it's not, we've got to change the perception of what even things like parental leave is. Both of us are parents, and, you know, dads and mums both want to play great roles. So even some of those softer and potentially smaller elements, and absolute flexibility with work. And yes, the last 18 months has been incredibly abnormal, but we even pre-COVID had a all roles can flex attitude, and that's for our most senior people to make flexibility a very normal thing as much as we can accommodate within the business. And lastly, on accountability, all of our leadership team have specific improvement targets around diversity for their businesses and their teams. And, you know, we're doing well on a relative basis, but we're not where we want to be on an absolute basis. And everyone's got to be accountable. And my job is to hold everyone to account as well as setting that example.
Wonderful. I'm going to take a little bit of an opportunity to also share something which I find I personally am quite proud of. So last year, just to follow on from all this and about accountability, so we at Aberdeen stated what we called a D&I expectation statement for our companies specifically. And as I mentioned, and we've been mentioning, I think Kylie, you mentioned at the beginning that there's been many events that you sort of take a glance around and there's still only maybe, you know, 5-10% representation. That's very much the case from a corporate perspective as well. So we took the initiative to put together this D&I expectation statement for listed companies. We sent it to all companies in our Australian equity portfolios, outlining our expectations for them from a gender and a cultural D&I perspective. And it included expectations that ASX 100 company boards will be gender balanced by 23. Those outside the 100 will be gender balanced by 2025. And then the next level down was executive teams, and company executive teams to be gender balanced by 2027. And by gender balanced, we mean 40% specifically. And, you know, we made it very clear we're now engaging with the companies on this, and we are aligning our proxy voting policy towards it as well. And it's quite interesting to see the feedback we've got. And I must admit the overwhelming responses that corporates have also come along for this journey. They realise, you know, it's now or never, and it's time to make some change. So it's really encouraging to hear that, you know, from an asset point of view, from an investment management point of view, but also from the corporates themselves that are listed, there is some genuine change going on. So with that, I think, Jodie, I'm not sure if you're still with us. I can't see you, but if your mic comes on, I'll take it that you are.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Fantastic.
Okay. I'm sorry, anyone on the northern beaches of Sydney will sympathise. We have the worst internet in Australia, I think.
No problem. Look, I think I'd just like to just get your views here and what you're seeing in your role as co-chair of the FSC Diversity Working Group. You know, are there kind of observations you'd like to share with us? And then following on from that, I'd personally be quite interested in 5 years' time. What does success look like for you within that role?
Sure. Okay. So first thing I would say is I was a late joiner to the Diversity Working Group and have only recently taken on the co-chair role. So I want to acknowledge Jen Driscoll from Alliance Bernstein, who was co-chair until recently, and Jonathan Armitage, who's still the other co-chair, along with the rest of the working group, did much of the heavy lifting and you know, made the difficult decisions around how to present this to FSC members as we're doing it now. There were lots of trade-offs, lots of difficult discussion. Can I just check you still hear me, Michelle?
Yep, still here.
Yes.
Yeah.
My trust level is currently low. So we recognise as an industry we need to do more. We've developed the Gender Diversity Resource Library, Guidance Note 38, and of course now launching this charter. And all of these are meant to provide resources, practical suggestions, case studies, frameworks, and so on to assist firms in their efforts to increase gender balance. We've mentioned that on average, our members, fund manager members, have better stats than average than the Frontier Advisors survey. But the point of the numbers isn't to criticise the composition of investment management teams, and the point of the survey and the charter is to set a baseline and then to help the industry with the resources I've just described to move forward. I wanted to mention that the working group was very informed by Her Majesty's Treasury Women in Finance Charter in the UK. That's been around for a while, and the results of that are reviewed annually. And what we're seeing from that is the vast majority of signatories have improved or maintained the proportion of women in senior management. That charter is about senior management, not investment management particularly or specifically. So like my goal with this work and success in 5 years' time is that we're having honest conversations about the challenges, we're creating shared intention and forward progress. And I think success is that we have more signatories and that the signatories we have are showing improvement from where they started. And I saw a question in the chat about quotas. That was something that we debated long and hard in the Diversity Working Group. And I think that the charter was to encourage industry to take positive steps, not to mandate a minimum. So we created flexibility in the charter deliberately to allow firms to set their own targets, considering where they are today.
Great. No, thank you for that, Jodie. Look, I think just conscious of time as well, we did want to have a little bit of time left for Q&A, but before we get there, if there's just a comment from each of you, I always like, you know, and I'm sure our participants will also love to hear just any career advice for women, specifically the next generation of PMs or CIOs to help them progress their careers.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go for it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, you know, I'm happy to go first on that. Look, I think, you know, there's a bit of what I described, sort of persistence and resilience that's required in terms of, you know, how you think about your investment career in investment management, because it's you know, it's not always an easy road, and I'm sure any of us who've been in this industry for a while could, you know, say that there's been, you know, points in time where it gets challenging. And I think some of those stats that David quoted there about, you know, women being, you know, more likely to leave the industry, less likely to get promoted, you know, are sort of feeding in to that. But, you know, one of the things that I love about this industry and I love about my job is the very strong sense of purpose that comes with it. I mean, if we do a good job and we generate great investment outcomes, you know, we're very directly making an impact in our clients or investors' lives, you know, whether that be our superannuation members or it could be, you know, not for profit that's, you know, generating more returns to invest back into their community. And so I would just say, stick with it. Look for organisations that you know are, you know, have good values and a culture that's aligned with supporting women and supporting diversity more broadly. And, you know, it's possible. More and more, we're getting more role models, which I think is terrific. I'm absolutely so proud to be one myself. So, you know, I think just stick with it. It's worth it. And it's, you know, such a super job to have and such a privileged position to be in. But absolutely the hard work is worth it.
And I'd echo Kylie's comments, you know, particularly persistence and resilience. Not all things are the way that we would like. And you know, I very much encourage all of our leadership team. We've got to be good citizens, and that means we are responsible for bringing change. I'd ask everyone, please try and retain confidence through that persistence and resilience, and also always make sure that you are somewhere where that capability, because we have, without doubt, incredibly capable people on this call, that you are working somewhere where that is appreciated. And I think organisational purpose and values, and if that's right, and you do retain your confidence and belief, self-belief, that will go a long way. And I'm very much in the camp of encourage where you can and bring out the best of everyone who wants to be part of your organisation. So.
Well, thank you, David. And Jodie, any pearls of wisdom?
Probably my biggest one, Michelle, would be find some solid role models both within your organisation and outside of your organisation to discuss tricky things with. So I don't know, I would probably have in normal life, you know, 3 coffees a week with someone, you know, different people very early in their career, mid-level in their career, and have some really interesting conversations. I had a conversation with a woman in investment management a little while ago, and we talked about why she didn't have equity in the business yet. And so I was giving her some strategies around that. So like whether you're starting out or midway along, have someone who you can have really honest conversations with. And don't be afraid to approach senior people, because I think most of us see it as our job to help the next generation come along, particularly women.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thank you to all of you. I think there's a lot to take from that. And I've been answering or just shooting across, the questions as they come through. But I have seen one more, and we have spoken to this throughout the conversation, I must say, around specific initiatives that have been implemented that have led to the greatest change. So I think we have spoken to that across the board, whether it's hiring or I don't know if, Kylie, there was anything specific that you can point to that has had the most meaningful change, if there's 1 or 2 things.
Yeah, I'd actually like to answer this with a couple of examples, because I see that there's a couple of questions or comments in there about this. You know, we can't find the senior women, and look, no doubt the numbers are, you know, are small, but if you, I guess my direct response to that would be try harder. And it gets back to some of David's points earlier about thinking differently about how you recruit and not using the same old criteria. So just to give you an example of when Mercer hired for my role, and they were very clear with the recruiter who ran the process that they wanted a gender balanced talent pool. And my understanding is the first time that came back, it was not gender balanced, and they said, go back and try harder. But they said something else that was really powerful, which was, we understand that to bring us a gender balanced talent pool is that you're not going to have a whole talent pool full of people who are currently CIOs, right? So work harder, go down into the investment teams. Where are the females inside those investment teams who are CIO ready, but, you know, have hit a bottleneck or for whatever reason, you know, aren't making it to that next level? and bring us those. And I think that's where the real power is in saying, you know, the old way would have been, well, here's 10 CIOs to consider for your CIO role. Well, actually, that's probably not going to get you there. You need to be thinking about bringing the next generation of talent through. So, you know, great to be a beneficiary of that process. But just to give another example, we have a terrific female fixed interest PM in my team. She'd been a fixed interest, Sue Wang, many of you will know her. She'd been a fixed interest manager researcher for a very long time. She didn't have portfolio management experience, but did she know the fixed interest universe inside out? Did she know the managers inside out? And had she been working with clients for many, many years on constructing fixed interest portfolios? Yes. So she had this tangential but very transferable skill set. So we grabbed her and we put her in the portfolio management role. She's been there for a couple of years now and absolutely terrific. So it's about thinking differently about how you go about that recruitment process that I think is really key.
Very good points. Okay, I think we have time for one other that's come through, and it's around COVID impact and how that has influenced the numbers direct. So any clear trends from COVID-19? And I'm not sure that we've got the data on hand, but I think we've spoken to it quite at length that this is absolutely an opportunity from the perspective that what previously roles were considered to be very much on desk and you can't have flexibility or work from home. It's proven factually incorrect now. So I'm pretty encouraged by what the stats will come out of COVID, but that's probably something for the next session. Bianca, I see you've come back on board. Look, I'd like to just thank, and David, I'll pass on to you, but thank you for the panelists, and I'm sure you've got some final words as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Can I just say I greatly value the work that the FSC has done, and particularly, in case everyone's just not clear on this was led very much by some of our senior female members and directors of the FSC through our Fund Management Board Committee. So we're very grateful for the effort that so many people have put in and the initiative. It is a really important one. If I think about our industry as a whole, while these problems persist, we do not perform as well as an industry as we can. And as I said, I don't need to see research for that. I know that's actually the case. These initiatives are really important. A lot of the questions today have been focused around the practical things that we do. And I think opportunities to share those things and also to understand, you know, what is giving the most impact, what works. I think all of us as a group doing that will be for the better of the industry and the better of all of our organisations. So thank you to the FSC, Michelle, Kylie, Jodie, thank you for your participation. And with that, Bianca, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, David. And thank you to everyone for continuing to talk about this really important topic. We know that collectively as an industry, we can achieve a lot if we have a really specific focus. And there were some great takeaways, I think, for everyone who joined today. It's clear that this is a multifaceted issue and that there is no one silver bullet that will fix it. It's about increasing the pipeline. It's about increasing retention and having a look right across the business. And I think what was really helpful was for everyone on the call today to be able to hear about the things that really do work and do help to shift the dial. So on behalf of the FSC, thank you to everyone and who's been involved also in the Diversity Working Group. I've been leading this piece of work from a policy perspective together with the co-chairs and the members. And now we're seeing the fruits of the labour, which is, you know, we're at the start of a long journey to go, but we all have to start somewhere. So thank you. And then on behalf of Mercer and the FSC, thank you for joining us today.